The medical bay of Arboris 9 space station hummed with the steady rhythm of machines and soft footfalls of medical personnel. Located on the fringes of the frontier sector, the station served as a crucial waypoint for travelers, explorers, and the occasional emergency case too critical to wait for transport to the core systems. Dr. Lyra Voss stood silently before the surgical preparation chamber, her six-fingered hands moving with practiced precision as she activated the sterilization field. Her silver-blue skin caught the antiseptic light, casting subtle ripples across her face as she focused on the upcoming procedure. As the station's leading xenobiologist and surgeon specializing in human-alien hybrid medicine, Lyra had built a reputation that drew patients from across three sectors. "Patient vitals stabilizing," Dr. Voss reported R3, her clone nurse assistant. R3's uniform features, designed for maximum efficiency and minimal emotional interference, contrasted with Lyra's distinctly alien appearance. "The sedation protocol has taken effect. Captain Hale is ready for preliminary examination." Lyra nodded, her large, multifaceted eyes narrowing slightly as she studied the bio readings floating above her wrist console. "The chest pain readings are unusual, inconsistent with standard human cardiac distress." She paused, recalling her previous failure. A Centaurian diplomat whose unique physiology had reacted catastrophically to what should have been routine treatment. That memory had haunted her for years, pushing her to be more thorough, more cautious. The doors to the main surgical theater parted, revealing Marcus Hale, Earthborn captain of the interstellar freighter, Persistent Dawn. His skin had a grayish pallor, and even unconscious, his face was twisted in pain. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate-controlled environment. Patient arrived complaining of severe chest pain, radiating to left arm and jaw. R3 recited. Symptoms began approximately 4 standard hours ago during routine maintenance operations. No previous cardiac history noted. Lyra moved closer, hovering her diagnostic scanner over Marcus's chest. The readings made her pause. "This isn't a standard myocardial infarction," she murmured. "The energy signature within his cardiac tissue is fluctuating, almost as if something is generating its own bioelectric field inside his heart." Behind her, the door hissed open again. Dr. Odin Krell entered, his tall frame imposing despite his human appearance. As Chief Medical Officer of Arboris 9, Krell's presence during unscheduled emergency procedures was unusual. "I received the preliminary alerts," he said, his voice carrying the crisp accent of someone educated in the core systems. "A human with anomalous cardiac readings? Anything worth my attention? Voss?" Lyra felt a familiar tension creep into her shoulders. Krell's interest rarely stemmed from concern for patients. His reputation for publishing groundbreaking research, often at the expense of thorough verification protocols, was well known throughout the medical community. "I'm still assessing, Dr. Krell," she replied evenly. "The patient requires immediate intervention. His pain levels indicate—" Yes. Krell waved a dismissive hand. "Handle the immediate distress, but I want all tissue samples preserved. If there's something novel here, Arboris 9 deserves the research credit." As Krell departed, Lyra exchanged a meaningful glance with R3. The clone nurse's expression remained neutral, but Lyra had worked with this particular unit long enough to recognize the subtle shift in posture that indicated disapproval. "Prepare for emergency thoracic intervention," Lyra instructed. "Full spectrum analysis during the procedure." The surgical suite transformed around them. Walls shifted to accommodate additional equipment, and the ceiling reconfigured to provide optimal lighting. The operating table itself began to generate a containment field that would both stabilize the patient and isolate any potentially dangerous biological materials. As Lyra's hands moved through the sterilization sequence, her mind drifted briefly to Project Seedling, a classified research initiative she had participated in nearly a decade earlier on Proxima Centauri's contested fourth planet. The project had been abruptly terminated, all records sealed by Galactic Health Authority order. Sometimes, in her dreams, she still saw the laboratory flames, heard the alarms. "Dr. Voss?" R3's voice pulled her back to the present. "The patient's cardiac distress is increasing, intervention window narrowing." Lyra nodded, pushing away the memories. "Beginning procedure now." The surgical tools, a blend of traditional instruments and biotechnology, responded to her movements with intuitive precision. The laser scalpel hummed as it parted Marcus's skin, muscle, and sternum with minimal bleeding. Microbots managed tissue separation while maintaining cellular integrity. Within moments, Marcus Hale's chest cavity lay open, his heart exposed. Lyra froze. "That's impossible," she whispered, where she had expected to find standard human cardiac tissue, perhaps damaged by some form of space radiation or exotic pathogen. She instead saw something that defied all medical understanding. Marcus's heart pulsed with normal rhythm, but embedded within its muscular wall was a distinct mass of tissue, approximately the size of a small plum, that appeared to be growing. "R3, enhance visual spectrum and initiate cellular analysis," Lyra commanded, her professional detachment momentarily shaken. The imaging system focused, and the tissue mass appeared on the main display. Its structure was unlike anything in standard medical databases. It pulsed with its own independent rhythm, surrounded by a network of newly formed vessels that had integrated seamlessly with Marcus's circulatory system. Initial analysis indicates the presence of rapidly dividing cells with characteristics of both embryonic development and mature specialized tissue, R3 reported. The structure contains both human DNA markers and unidentified genetic sequences. Lyra's mind raced through possibilities. Parasitic infection, tumor with unprecedented organization, nanomachine colony. But as the analysis continued, another possibility, one so improbable it bordered on impossible, began to take shape. "R3, Lyra said quietly. "Run comparison with embryonic development patterns across all known sentient species." The system hummed, correlating billions of data points in seconds. The result appeared on screen, confirming Lyra's impossible suspicion. "Correlation established," R3 announced. "The mass exhibits 82% similarity to early-stage embryonic development patterns found in sentient species. In simplest terms, Dr. Voss, it appears to be a baby," Lyra finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Growing inside his heart, she stared at the pulsing mass, its presence defying everything she knew about biology, medicine, and the natural order. As a xenobiologist, she had documented countless evolutionary adaptations and reproductive strategies across the galaxy. But nothing, absolutely nothing like this. In that moment, as the impossible life form pulsed within Marcus Hale's heart, Lyra made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives forever. Instead of removing the tissue mass as medical protocol would dictate, she carefully extracted a small sample for analysis while stabilizing the surrounding cardiac tissue. "R3, adjust surgical parameters. Will reinforce the cardiac wall and ensure proper blood flow. But the anomalous tissue remains in place until we understand what we're dealing with. That contradicts standard protocol for foreign bodies in critical organs," R3 noted, though the clone nurse was already adjusting the surgical tools to comply. "This isn't a foreign body," Lyra replied, her focus absolute as she worked. "Whatever it is, it's growing as if it belongs there." As she carefully closed Marcus's chest, sealing the layers of tissue with regenerative compounds, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen something like this before. In the classified files of Project Seedling, in the experiments that had gone so terribly wrong. But that was impossible. Those experiments had been destroyed, the research buried. Unless... She glanced at the unconscious form of Marcus Hale. Who was he really? And what secret was growing inside his heart? The universe, it seemed, had placed its most precious and terrifying mystery directly in her hands. The soft blue glow of the laboratory illuminated Lyra's face as she hunched over the analysis chamber. 3 days had passed since the emergency surgery, and she had barely slept, existing on stimulants and determination. Marcus Hale remained in medically induced stasis, stable but unconscious, while Lyra worked tirelessly to understand the impossibility growing within him. "Genetic sequence analysis complete," announced the lab's AI assistant. "Results display significant anomalies." Lyra swiped through the holographic data projections, her eyes widening as the implications became clear. The tissue sample from Marcus's heart contained DNA that shifted between recognizable human patterns and completely alien sequences that rewrote themselves, even as they were being analyzed. "It's adapting," she murmured, "evolving in real time." She had encountered adaptive genetics before. Certain extremophile species could restructure limited portions of their genome in response to environmental stressors, but nothing with this level of fluidity. The entity in Marcus's heart was literally rewriting its own genetic code as it developed, incorporating elements of its host while maintaining a distinct identity. The laboratory door slid open, and Dr. Krell entered without announcement, his eyes immediately fixed on the genetic displays. "Fascinating," he said, moving closer. "You've been quite secretive about your findings. Dr. Voss, 3 days of independent research without submitting preliminary reports to the medical board." Lyra straightened, instinctively moving to block Krell's view of her notes. "The case requires thorough investigation before any conclusions can be drawn. Premature reporting could lead to someone else claiming the discovery," Krell finished, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I've reviewed the surgical logs. A developing organism within a human heart? Do you understand what this means for evolutionary biology? For our understanding of symbiotic relationships? This could redefine reproductive science across the galaxy. It could also kill the patient if handled improperly," Lyra countered. "We don't understand what we're dealing with." Krell's expression hardened. "The patient is secondary to the discovery. Voss, Arborist 9 has struggled for recognition in the scientific community for years. This," he gestured to the genetic displays, "could put us on the map. I've already drafted a preliminary announcement for the Galactic Medical Journal." Alarm shot through Lyra. "You've what? Without consultation, without peer review. We have ethical obligations to advance medical science," Krell interrupted. "I'm giving you 12 hours to compile your findings for publication. As Chief Medical Officer, I'll be listed as primary researcher, of course, with you as contributing investigator." Lyra felt cold anger rising within her. "The patient hasn't even regained consciousness. We have no idea how this organism is affecting his physiology long term. Publication at this stage would be irresponsible and premature." Krell's expression darkened. 12 hours, Dr. Voss. After that, I'll proceed with or without your cooperation." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and I've scheduled an extraction procedure for tomorrow. We need the organism intact for proper study." After he left, Lyra remained motionless, her mind racing. An extraction would almost certainly kill both Marcus and the developing entity within him. Ethics aside, there was something about this case that nagged at her, something familiar that hovered just beyond her conscious recall. She returned to the genetic displays, focusing on a particular sequence that had caught her attention. As she isolated it for closer examination, a memory surfaced, a security-sealed laboratory on Proxima Centauri 4, experimental gene splicing that combined human DNA with something ancient, recovered from deep space exploration. "Project Seedling," she whispered. She had been younger then, eager to participate in what she believed was cutting-edge research into enhanced human adaptation to extreme environments. Only later did she discover the project's true nature, creating hybrid life forms designed to survive in environments no pure human could endure. When the experiments began producing sentient offspring with unpredictable abilities, the project was terminated, the research supposedly destroyed. But some of those genetic markers matched what she was seeing now. R3, she called out, knowing the clone nurse would be monitoring the lab remotely. Access Marcus Hale's complete medical history and personal records. I need to know everything, especially any connection to Proxima Centauri system or military research divisions. Accessing, R3's voice replied through the communication system. Be advised that comprehensive background searches require security clearance authorization. Override using Medical Emergency Protocol Theta-7, Lyra responded. It was a rarely used clause that permitted invasive investigation when a patient's condition posed potential public health risks. As the system began its search, Lyra returned to her analysis of the tissue sample. Under the microscope, the cells pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm, dividing and specializing at an accelerated rate. What would normally take weeks in standard embryonic development was occurring in days. Most concerning were the energy readings. The developing entity was generating its own bioelectric field, weak, but growing stronger. If it continued to develop at this rate, the energy output could begin to interfere with Marcus's own cardiac electrical signals. Hours passed as Lyra worked, piecing together the puzzle. R3 returned with fragments of information about Marcus Hale, his service record in Earth's expansion fleet, medical history showing standard genetic modifications common to deep space travelers, and an unexplained 18-month gap in his documented history approximately 7 years ago. The timing matches, Lyra muttered. He could have been at Proxima Centauri during Project Seedling's final phase. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the subtle change in the laboratory's security indicators, a brief flicker that suggested someone was accessing the medical database remotely. Lyra quickly traced the intrusion, surprised to find it originated from R3's terminal in the medical bay. When she arrived there, she found the clone nurse interfacing directly with the central database, downloading information at an unprecedented rate. R3, Lyra said quietly, "What are you doing?" The clone nurse disconnected immediately, turning to face Lyra with the same neutral expression as always. But something had changed. There was an intentionality in R3's movements that hadn't been there before. "I have been correlating data regarding the embryonic entity," R3 explained. "My findings indicate a 97% probability that Captain Hale was an involuntary participant in genetic experimentation." Lyra stared at the clone nurse. R3 units weren't programmed for independent research initiatives or to form probabilistic conclusions. They followed orders, maintained patient care, and assisted with procedures. "How did you determine that?" Lyra asked carefully. "I identified classified markers in the genetic structure of the entity," R3 replied. "These markers correspond to experimental protocols developed for Project Seedling. The entity appears to be a dormant, hybrid embryo, artificially implanted and programmed to begin development when specific conditions are met." Lyra felt a chill run through her. "How do you know about Project Seedling? Those files are classified beyond your clearance level." R3 was silent for a moment. "I am not certain. The information appears in my knowledge base without clear acquisition parameters." The clone nurse's head tilted slightly. "Dr. Voss, I believe the entity is attempting to communicate." "Communicate? It's barely developed beyond early embryonic stages." "Nevertheless, unusual patterns have appeared in Captain Hale's brainwave activity when in proximity to the monitoring equipment. These patterns correspond to primitive communication attempts rather than random neural firing." Before Lyra could respond, an alert sounded from the patient monitoring system. Marcus Hale's vital signs were fluctuating, not dangerously, but in a rhythmic pattern that suggested increased activity. "He's waking up," Lyra realized. The sedation protocol is failing. She hurried to the recovery room, R3 following close behind. Marcus lay on the medical bed, his eyes still closed but his fingers twitching. The biometric displays showed increasing brain activity and a strange synchronization between his heartbeat and the pulsing of the entity within it. "Captain Hale," Lyra said, adjusting the monitoring equipment. "Can you hear me?" Marcus's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as he became aware of his surroundings. His hand moved instinctively to his chest, feeling the regenerated tissue where the surgery had been performed. "What happened?" he managed, his voice hoarse from disuse. Lyra exchanged a glance with R3, then turned back to Marcus. "You experienced severe chest pain and were brought to Arboris 9 for emergency treatment. I performed surgery and discovered something unusual." Marcus struggled to sit up, wincing with the effort. "Unusual how? How does one tell a patient that an unknown entity is growing inside their heart?" Lyra had delivered difficult news before, terminal diagnoses, irreversible conditions, but nothing like this. "Captain Hale," she began carefully, "during surgery, I discovered a mass of tissue within your heart that appears to be developing." "A tumor?" he asked, fear flashing across his face. "No," Lyra replied. "Not a tumor. It appears to be an embryonic life form, integrated with your cardiac tissue." Marcus stared at her, incomprehension slowly giving way to horror. "You're saying there's something growing inside my heart? Like a parasite?" "Not exactly. Its genetic structure shares similarities with your own DNA, but also contains unknown sequences. It's more like—" Lyra hesitated, searching for the right words. "More like a child." The color drained from Marcus's face. "That's impossible. I'm a man. Men don't. We can't. Under normal circumstances." "No," Lyra agreed. "But I believe you may have been subjected to genetic experimentation. Were you ever involved with a research initiative called Project Seedling?" Marcus's reaction was immediate and visceral. His body tensed, pupils dilating with fear or recognition. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his physiological response told a different story. "Captain Hale," Lyra pressed, "if you know anything about this, it's crucial that you share it. Dr. Krell, the chief medical officer here, is planning to extract the entity tomorrow for research purposes. The procedure could be fatal for both you and the developing life form." Marcus's hand pressed more firmly against his chest. "No one's cutting me open again," he said firmly. Then, more quietly, "Not until I understand what's happening." Lyra nodded. "I agree, but time is limited. Dr. Krell has already begun preparations for publication and extraction. We need to understand what we're dealing with, and quickly." For a long moment, Marcus was silent, his gaze distant as if searching through memories. Finally, he spoke. "7 years ago, I transported research personnel to Proxima Centauri 4, classified mission, high security. I wasn't supposed to know what they were working on, but—" He paused. "There was an accident, containment breach. I helped evacuate the scientists, was exposed to something in the process. They kept me in quarantine for months afterward. Ran tests, said I was clear. Eventually—" "Did they perform any surgical procedures during that time?" Lyra asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "Minor ones. Said they were removing potentially contaminated tissue, implanting monitoring devices." His eyes widened with sudden realization. "You think they put this thing inside me then?" "It's possible," Lyra confirmed. "The entity appears to have been dormant until recently. Something must have triggered its development." R3, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke. "Recent scans indicate the entity responded to a specific radiation signature, approximately 2 weeks ago. Records show Captain Hale's ship passed through the remnants of a supernova during that time frame. Marcus looked bewildered. How would radiation trigger whatever this is? Project Seedling was researching life forms that could adapt to extreme environments, Lyra explained, including radiation levels that would be fatal to humans. If this entity was designed to activate under such conditions. She didn't finish the thought. The implications were staggering. Someone had placed a genetically engineered embryo inside Marcus, programmed to begin developing when exposed to specific environmental triggers. But why? And what would it become once fully developed? I need to examine you more thoroughly, Lyra decided. And we need to keep this quiet until we understand more. If Dr. Krell proceeds with his plans. No one's cutting this thing out of me until I know what it is, Marcus said firmly. And why it's there. Lyra nodded. Then we need to act quickly. R3. Prepare the secondary laboratory for comprehensive analysis. We'll need to move Captain Hale there before Dr. Krell realizes he's conscious. As R3 moved to comply, Lyra found herself making a decision that could end her medical career. Or worse. She was choosing to hide a patient from her superior, to conduct unauthorized research, to defy direct orders. But looking at Marcus Hale, at the fear and determination in his eyes, at the miracle or monstrosity growing within his heart, she knew she had no choice. Some questions demanded answers, no matter the cost. And deep within her, a suspicion was growing that she wasn't as disconnected from this mystery as she had believed. The familiar patterns in the genetic code, R3's unexplained knowledge of classified information, her own fragmented memories of Project Seedling. Everything was connected. She just couldn't see the pattern yet. The secondary laboratory, tucked away in Arboris 9's maintenance sector, had originally been designed for quarantine research during the Andromeda Plague Crisis, 15 years earlier. Now, it served as an impromptu operating theater, as Lyra prepared for a procedure that violated every medical protocol she had sworn to uphold. This is madness, Marcus said, watching her prepare the surgical equipment. Despite his protest, he had already positioned himself on the medical table. You're going to perform heart surgery in a maintenance lab. This facility is fully equipped for biological research, Lyra assured him. Though the truth was more complicated. The lab was adequate, but far from ideal. And R3 has rerouted the security feeds. As far as Dr. Krell knows, you're still in medically induced stasis. R3 moved with unusual efficiency, preparing surgical tools and calibrating monitoring equipment. The clone nurse had been exhibiting increasingly autonomous behavior, concerning under normal circumstances, but invaluable in their current situation. The procedure will be minimally invasive, Lyra explained, activating the surgical visualization system. I'll insert microprobes to gather more comprehensive data about the entity and attempt controlled communication. Communication? Marcus echoed, alarm evident in his voice. With the thing in my heart? It's generating organized electrical patterns consistent with primitive neural activity, Lyra explained. R3 detected what appeared to be communication attempts. If we can establish even basic contact, it might help us understand its nature and purpose. Marcus swallowed hard, but nodded his consent. Lyra administered a localized anesthetic, carefully calibrated to numb the area without affecting the entity's activity. Unlike the previous surgery, Marcus would remain conscious throughout this procedure. You'll feel pressure, but no pain, Lyra told him as she positioned the first microprobe. Try to remain still. Using the visualization system as a guide, she delicately inserted the probe through Marcus's chest wall and into his heart, navigating to the chamber where the entity had embedded itself. The microscopic camera at the probe's tip transmitted images to the main display, showing the entity in unprecedented detail. Lyra gasped. In just 3 days, it had developed significantly. What had been an amorphous mass of tissue now showed clear organizational structure. Primitive organs were forming, and a network of neural tissue pulsed with activity. Most striking was the protective sac that had formed around it, not quite a placenta, but serving a similar function. "It's growing faster than I anticipated," Lyra murmured, carefully positioning the probe to gather maximum data without disturbing the entity. "Is that bad?" Marcus asked, trying to see the display without moving. "It's unprecedented," Lyra replied. "At this rate of development," she performed a quick calculation, "it could reach full maturation within weeks rather than months." As the probe moved closer to the entity, something unexpected happened. The neural tissue pulsed more rapidly, and the entity shifted position, a deliberate movement, not the random twitching of developing muscle tissue. "It's responding to the probe," R3 observed, electrical activity increasing by 47%. Lyra carefully extended a secondary filament from the probe, one designed to measure and transmit electrical impulses. "I'm going to attempt basic stimulus-response communication." She sent a simple pattern through the filament. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. A universal signal used in first contact protocols with potentially sentient organisms. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the entity's neural network flared with activity, and a response came. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. Followed by a new pattern. "It responded," Lyra whispered, amazement overwhelming her professional detachment. "And elaborated on the pattern." Marcus's eyes widened. "It can understand?" "Not exactly understand," Lyra clarified. "But it can recognize patterns and replicate them. That suggests at least rudimentary intelligence, even at this early stage of development." She sent another pattern, more complex this time. The entity responded almost immediately, replicating the pattern, and once again adding its own variation. "Remarkable," Lyra murmured. "Its neural development is far beyond what its physical maturation would suggest. Almost as if..." "As if it was designed that way," R3 finished. Project Seedling protocols included accelerated neural development to ensure cognitive function prior to complete physical maturation. Lyra glanced at R3, once again struck by the clone nurse's inexplicable knowledge. There would be time to address that mystery later. For now, the entity demanded her full attention. She was preparing another communication sequence when the entity suddenly pulsed with intense energy. The monitoring equipment registered a spike in bioelectric output, and Marcus gasped, his back arching involuntarily. "What's happening?" he managed through gritted teeth. Before Lyra could respond, the laboratory lights flickered, and every electronic system in the room momentarily faltered. The energy spike had somehow affected the station's power grid. "Impossible," Lyra muttered, rapidly adjusting the probe to maintain visualization. "It's generating an electromagnetic field far beyond what its size should allow." The entity pulsed again, stronger this time. Marcus cried out, not in pain, but in shock, as a sound emanated from within his chest. Not a physical sound that traveled through air, but something perceived directly by the mind. A cry that resonated at the most primitive level of consciousness. The lights went out completely, plunging the laboratory into darkness, broken only by the emergency illumination strips along the floor. Throughout Arboris 9, alarms began to sound as systems failed in cascading sequence. "Station-wide power fluctuation detected," announced the emergency system. "All non-essential operations suspended. Emergency protocols activated." In the dim red glow of the emergency lights, Lyra stared at the visualization screen, which was now operating on backup power. The entity had curled into itself, its neural activity chaotic but organized, like a mind in distress. "It's afraid," she realized. Something triggered a fear response. Marcus lay still, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "I felt it," he whispered. "In my mind, it was crying." R3, move to the communication terminal. Security protocols have been activated. Dr. Krell is initiating an emergency response team. They will search the station sector by sector. Lyra made a swift decision. We need to stabilize the entity and get you out of here before they find us. She carefully began withdrawing the probe. Whatever triggered this response, we can't risk it happening again while... She stopped mid-sentence as new information appeared on the visualization screen. As the probe retreated, it captured a final image of the entity and revealed something Lyra had missed in her earlier examinations. Embedded within the entity's developing neural structure was a microscopic device, artificial in origin, not medical technology, but something more sophisticated and sinister. It's been implanted with some kind of control mechanism, Lyra said, enhancing the image. That's what responded to the probe, not the entity itself, but this device. Marcus's expression darkened. You mean someone's controlling it? From inside me? Not controlling exactly, Lyra corrected, studying the device's structure. This appears to be programmed with specific response protocols. When the probe approached too closely, it triggered a defensive mechanism. R3 moved closer to examine the image. The technology matches classified prototypes developed during Phase 3 of Project Seedling. It was designed to protect hybrid embryos from rejection by host organisms. Lyra stared at the clone nurse. How could you possibly know that? Before R3 could respond, the laboratory door control panel beeped. Someone was attempting to override the security lockout. They've found us, Lyra said, quickly removing the remaining probes from Marcus's chest and activating the regeneration field to seal the entry points. R3, is there another way out? Maintenance access tunnel connects to the emergency shuttle bay, R3 replied, already moving toward a seemingly solid wall panel. The panel slid aside at the clone nurse's touch, revealing a narrow passage. Can you walk? Lyra asked Marcus, as she helped him from the table. He nodded, wincing as he stood. Where are we going? Somewhere we can continue our research without interruption, Lyra replied. She grabbed a portable medical kit and the data core containing their findings. We need to understand what's happening before Krell gets his hands on either of you. As they entered the maintenance tunnel, the laboratory door slid open behind them. Lyra caught a glimpse of security personnel entering before the panel closed, sealing them safely away. They moved as quickly as Marcus's condition allowed, navigating the narrow maintenance passages that ran throughout Arborist 9. R3 led the way, displaying knowledge of the station's layout that went far beyond standard medical programming. The entity's energy discharge affected primary and secondary power systems. R3 reported as they walked. 78% of the station is operating on emergency power. This has created multiple security breaches and system malfunctions. Which means Krell will have his hands full, Lyra noted. It might buy us some time. Marcus suddenly stopped, leaning against the tunnel wall. Wait, he gasped, pressing a hand to his chest. Something's happening. Lyra quickly activated her portable scanner, holding it over Marcus's heart. The readings made her blood run cold. The entity's bioelectric field is expanding. It's growing again, accelerating beyond any projected rate. Marcus's face contorted with a mixture of pain and wonder. I can feel it moving, and something else, like whispers in my mind. Telepathic communication attempt detected, R3 announced, as if this were a standard medical observation. The entity is approaching developmental stage 4, according to Project Seedling protocols. Lyra turned to the clone nurse. Frustration, overriding caution. You need to tell me how you know these things. R3. Clone nurses don't have access to classified research data. They don't make independent assessments about telepathic communication. What aren't you telling us? R3 was silent for a moment, head tilted slightly, as if listening to some internal voice. When the clone nurse spoke again, the voice had changed, still mechanical, but with subtle inflections that hadn't been present before. I was not always R3, the clone nurse said. Before I was repurposed as a medical assistant, my consciousness housed the security protocols for Project Seedling. When the project was terminated, my memory was supposed to be wiped. It was imperfectly done. Lyra stared in disbelief. You're saying you were an AI security system? Correct. When the project facility was destroyed, my core programming was salvaged and repurposed. The genetic experiments conducted there were too valuable to lose entirely, but too dangerous to continue openly. Marcus pushed himself away from the wall, anger overriding his discomfort. So, what am I? Some kind of walking incubator for your experiments? Not mine, R3 corrected. I merely protected the information. The decision to implant the embryo was made by the project directors after the facility's destruction. You were chosen because your genetic profile showed compatibility with the hybrid entity. Compatibility? Marcus echoed. They put this thing in me without my knowledge or consent. The project directors believed the potential benefits outweighed ethical considerations. R3 stated, with mechanical simplicity, the hybrid entity represents an evolutionary leap, a being capable of surviving environments that would kill ordinary humans. Lyra's mind raced, connecting fragments of memory and new information. The supernova radiation, she realized. It wasn't just a trigger for development. It was a test, to see if the entity could withstand extreme radiation. Correct, R3 confirmed. Captain Hale's ship was intentionally routed through the supernova remnant to activate the embryo and test its resistance to radiation. Marcus looked horrified. My navigation system malfunctioned. The course correction took us directly through the radiation field. That was deliberate. Yes, as was your subsequent distress call bringing you to Arborist 9. Lyra felt a chill run through her. Why here specifically? R3 turned to her. And for the first time, Lyra saw something almost like emotion in the clone nurse's artificial eyes. Because you are here, Dr. Voss. You were part of Project Seedling before the termination event. Your genetic material was used in creating the hybrid entity. Biologically speaking, you are its mother. The revelation hit Lyra like a physical blow. Fragments of memory, gaps in her personal history that she had attributed to trauma or overwork, suddenly aligned into a coherent pattern. She remembered donating genetic material for what she had been told was research into radiation resistance. She remembered being kept in isolation afterward, subjected to tests, monitored for potential side effects. That's impossible, she whispered, though she already knew it was true. I would remember. Your memories were selectively suppressed, R3 explained. Standard procedure for all project participants. But they knew you would recognize the genetic patterns instinctively, even without conscious memory. Your expertise was necessary for the entity's final stage of development. Marcus looked between them, struggling to process the implications. So this thing in my heart is your child, and I'm what? Its surrogate father? In simplified biological terms, yes, R3 confirmed. Though its genetic structure is far more complex than a standard human-alien hybrid. It contains elements from multiple species, engineered for specific traits. Lyra felt dizzy with the implications. All these years, she had carried on with her life, unaware that her genetic material had been used to create this being, that she was, in the most fundamental sense, its mother. Why? She demanded. What's the purpose of creating such a being? Before R3 could answer, Marcus gasped again, doubling over. This time, his pain was unmistakable. It's happening again, he managed through gritted teeth. The energy. Building. Lyra's scanner showed an alarming spike in the entity's bioelectric output, far stronger than before. Throughout the maintenance tunnel, lights flickered and control panels sparked. We need to get to a secure location, Lyra decided. R3, can you still access the emergency shuttle bay? Affirmative. But security protocols will have been heightened. We have no choice, Lyra said, supporting Marcus as they began moving again. If the entity continues generating energy pulses at increasing strength, it could affect critical station systems. We need to get it away from Arboris 9. They had only gone a few meters when Marcus collapsed completely, crying out as a wave of energy visibly rippled from his chest. The tunnel's lighting system shattered, plunging them into darkness broken only by emergency chemical lights that activated automatically. Station-wide system failure, announced a distant alarm. Critical infrastructure compromised. Evacuation protocols activated. In the eerie green glow of the chemical lights, Lyra knelt beside Marcus, scanning his vitals. The entity was growing at an impossible rate, its energy signature expanding beyond the confines of Marcus's heart. It's breaking free, Lyra realized with a mixture of wonder and horror. The cardiac tissue can't contain it anymore. Marcus's eyes were wide with fear. Am I going to die? Not if I can help it, Lyra promised, quickly preparing an emergency stabilization field. The portable device would create a localized containment area, hopefully preventing further energy discharges while they completed their escape. As she positioned the device over Marcus's chest, R3 suddenly stepped forward. The stabilization field will be insufficient. The entity requires a more robust containment system. Before Lyra could respond, R3 opened a panel in the clone nurse's chest, revealing a sophisticated energy core, far more advanced than standard medical assistant units would contain. My systems were designed to interface with Project Seedling specimens, R3 explained. I can absorb and contain the energy discharge temporarily, allowing you to reach the shuttle bay. Lyra understood immediately what this meant. The energy levels would destroy your neural pathways. You'd lose all higher functions. Correct. But the biological material would survive. R3 looked at Marcus, then back to Lyra. The entity must survive. It represents the future of interstellar exploration and colonization. A being that can withstand environments no current species can endure. Another wave of energy emanated from Marcus, stronger than before. The maintenance tunnel's structure groaned under the strain, metal panels buckling. There's no time to debate, R3 said. The next discharge will breach the station's hull integrity. You must reach the shuttle. Before Lyra could protest further, R3 placed artificial hands directly on Marcus's chest. The clone nurse's body immediately began to glow as it absorbed the building energy from the entity. Security override protocols initiated, R3 announced, voice already distorting as systems overloaded. Shuttle Bay 3 has been unlocked and prepped for launch. Coordinates for safe harbor have been programmed into navigation. R3, Lyra began, but the clone nurse interrupted. The entity recognizes you, Dr. Voss. It has since your first contact. Genetic memory is more powerful than we anticipated. R3's voice became increasingly mechanical as systems failed. Project directors were wrong to proceed without consent. Some choices must be made freely. With those final words, R3's body convulsed as it absorbed a massive energy discharge from the entity. The clone nurse's systems overloaded in spectacular fashion, components failing in cascading sequence. When it was over, R3 stood frozen, a shell of metal and synthetic tissue, the internal light of consciousness extinguished. In the silence that followed, Marcus slowly sat up, pressing a hand to his chest with an expression of wonder rather than pain. The pressure, he said quietly. It's gone. Lyra quickly scanned him. The entity remained within his heart, but its energy output had stabilized at a manageable level. R3's sacrifice had bought them time, but how much? She couldn't say. Can you walk? She asked, helping Marcus to his feet. He nodded, casting a final glance at R3's motionless form. It saved us. Yes, Lyra agreed solemnly, and gave us a chance to understand what's happening without Krell's interference. They continued through the maintenance tunnel, leaving R3 behind. Lyra felt an unexpected grief at the loss of the clone nurse. Not just a tool or assistant, but a being with its own purpose and, in the end, its own choice. As they neared the shuttle bay, station-wide announcements echoed through the corridors. Security alert in all sectors. Unidentified energy source detected. All personnel proceed to emergency shelters. Krell will have the shuttle bay secured, Marcus pointed out as they approached the final access door. R3 said it was handled, Lyra replied, though uncertainty crept into her voice. How much could they trust the clone nurse's final promises? To her surprise, the access door opened at their approach, revealing Shuttle Bay 3 Beyond. As R3 had promised, a small medical transport shuttle stood ready, its systems active and pre-flight checks complete. They hurried inside, Lyra helping Marcus to a medical berth while she took the pilot's seat. The station's automatic traffic control attempted to override their launch sequence, but R3's security protocols had anticipated this. The shuttle's systems bypassed the lockdown commands and initiated launch. As they pulled away from Arborist 9, Lyra saw security personnel rushing into the shuttle bay. Dr. Krell among them, his face, visible through the observation window, contorted with fury as he realized what was happening. Then they were clear. The shuttle accelerating away from the station and into open space. Lyra checked the pre-programmed coordinates. A small research outpost in a remote sector, officially abandoned, but apparently still operational in some capacity. With the immediate danger behind them, Lyra turned her attention back to Marcus and the entity growing within him. Using the shuttle's more sophisticated medical equipment, she conducted a thorough scan. What she saw astonished her. The entity had stabilized at a new developmental stage, still within Marcus's heart, but now with clearly defined organs and a more complex neural structure. Most remarkably, it had formed a symbiotic relationship with Marcus's cardiovascular system, no longer placing strain on his heart, but actually enhancing its function. Your cardiac efficiency has increased by nearly 30%, Lyra told him, studying the readings. Oxygen utilization, cellular repair, all significantly improved. Marcus looked down at his chest, then back at Lyra. So it's helping me now. It appears so. The energy discharges may have been a necessary part of its development, a transition between stages. Lyra's mind raced with possibilities. R3 said it was designed to survive extreme environments. Perhaps this symbiotic relationship is part of that design. What happens next? Marcus asked. Will it stay inside me forever, keep growing? Lyra shook her head. I don't know. We're in uncharted territory. She hesitated, then added, but if R3 was correct about me being its mother, then perhaps I can communicate with it more directly. She adjusted the medical scanner to focus on the entity's neural activity, then placed her hand on Marcus's chest, directly over his heart. Closing her eyes, she concentrated on the rhythmic pulse beneath her fingers, both the familiar human heartbeat and the alien cadence of the entity within. For several moments, nothing happened. Then, like the faintest whisper at the edge of consciousness, she felt something, not words, not even coherent thought, but a presence, curious, intelligent, reaching out. Marcus gasped. I felt that, he said. Like recognition. Lyra nodded, maintaining her focus. The connection strengthened, emotions flowing through the tenuous link. Curiosity, contentment, purpose. And beneath it all, a sense of potential, of a future still taking shape. It knows us, Lyra whispered. Both of us. And it's not just a passive creation. It has awareness, intention. She opened her eyes, meeting Marcus's gaze. In that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of their strange, unprecedented connection. Whatever this entity was, whatever purpose it had been created for, it now bound them together in ways neither could have imagined. "We need to understand more," Lyra said, returning to the pilot's console. "About Project Seedling, about what this entity was designed to become. The research outpost should have answers." Marcus nodded, his hand still resting protectively over his heart. "And then what? We can't run forever. Krell will report this to the Galactic Health Authority. They'll hunt us down, take it for study." "One step at a time," Lyra replied, setting course for the coordinates R3 had provided. "First, we learn the truth. Then we decide what to do with it." As the shuttle accelerated to interstellar velocity, Lyra found herself contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. For years, she had dedicated herself to understanding the biological mysteries of the galaxy, to healing and preserving life. Now she had become part of a mystery herself, bound to an unprecedented creation by bonds of genetics and circumstance. And despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she felt an unfamiliar emotion taking root within her: hope. Whatever this entity was, whatever it might become, it represented something new in the universe, something with potential beyond the limited vision of Project Seedling's directors. In Marcus's heart, a new form of life was developing, one that might bridge the gap between species, between worlds. And Lyra was determined to protect it, to understand it, to help it become whatever it was meant to be. Not as an experiment, not as a weapon or tool, but as a child, finding its way in a universe of infinite possibility. The abandoned research outpost orbited a nondescript planetoid in a star system too remote to appear on standard navigation charts. As their shuttle approached, automated systems activated, guiding them to a docking port that opened like an expectant mouth in the station's weathered hull. "It doesn't look abandoned," Marcus observed, studying the outpost through the viewscreen. Despite obvious signs of age and minimal maintenance, lights glowed within its structure, and operational indicators showed functioning life support systems. "R3 must have sent activation codes ahead of our arrival," Lyra replied, as their shuttle settled into the docking cradle. "Someone has been maintaining this place, keeping it ready." "For what?" Marcus asked, the question hanging ominously between them. Lyra had no answer as they disembarked, entering the outpost's main airlock. The atmosphere inside was breathable but stale, with the peculiar flatness of long recycled air. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down curved corridors, guiding them deeper into the facility. "This architecture," Lyra noted, running her hand along a wall inscribed with unfamiliar symbols. "It's pre-expansion era, before Earth's colonial period." "Alien construction?" Marcus asked. "No, human, but old. Possibly one of the early deep space research initiatives, before formal contact with other species." They followed the activated pathway to a central chamber, a laboratory far more sophisticated than the outpost's exterior would suggest. Here, the lighting was brighter, and advanced research equipment hummed with quiet energy. Most striking was a large, cylindrical tank at the room's center, filled with a translucent fluid that glowed with subtle bioluminescence. "It's an incubation chamber," Lyra realized, approaching the tank. "Similar to those used in Project Seedling, but more advanced." Marcus remained near the entrance, one hand pressed protectively to his chest. "You think that's meant for what's inside me?" Before Lyra could respond, a holographic interface activated near the tank, projecting the image of a woman in outdated scientific attire. Though the projection flickered with age, the face was unmistakable, a younger version of Lyra herself. "Genetic verification confirmed," the hologram announced in Lyra's voice. "Welcome, Dr. Voss. Welcome, Carrier Hale. Your arrival has been anticipated for 7 years, 4 months, and 12 days." Lyra stared at her doppelganger, momentarily speechless. "I never recorded this," she finally managed. "I have no memory of this facility." "Memory suppression was necessary for operational security," the hologram replied. "This recording was created before that procedure, to ensure proper guidance upon your return." Marcus stepped forward, anger evident in his voice. "Who authorized putting this thing inside me? I never consented to being a carrier." The hologram turned toward him, expression regretful. "Your involvement was secured through falsified medical procedures following the containment breach. The project directors deemed it necessary after conventional incubation methods failed. Human cardiac tissue provided the ideal environment for early-stage development." "Why?" Lyra demanded. "What is this entity? What purpose was it designed for?" The holographic Lyra gestured, and the chamber filled with additional projections, star charts, biological schematics, mission parameters. Project Seedling's official objective was developing enhanced humans capable of surviving extreme environments, the hologram explained. The true objective was more ambitious, creating a bridge species. The projection shifted, showing a distant star system beyond the galaxy's edge. Long-range scans detected a potentially habitable world in this system. Conventional colonization would be impossible due to extreme radiation levels and atmospheric composition. The hybrid entity was designed to survive there and to transform the environment to support human habitation. "Terraforming," Lyra whispered. "You created a living terraforming engine." "Correct. Conventional methods would take centuries. The entity can accomplish the same result within a human lifetime, altering the environment through controlled energy manipulation while establishing a biological foothold." Marcus looked horrified. "So my heart is carrying some kind of planet-changing superweapon?" "Not a weapon," the hologram corrected. "A pioneer. The first of a new evolutionary branch, designed to expand humanity's reach beyond its current limitations." Lyra studied the biological schematics more closely, recognizing her own genetic contributions interwoven with alien DNA sequences. "You used my genetic material because of my adaptation to low-gravity environments," she realized. "My cellular regeneration capabilities." "Correct. Your unique genetic structure was ideal, particularly when combined with elements from radiation-resistant species." Marcus pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the entity pulse within. "So what happens now? It just keeps growing inside me until it's ready to terraform a planet?" The hologram's expression shifted to one of clinical concern. "The cardiac incubation phase was designed to last approximately 1 Earth year, providing the entity with a protected environment for early development. However, the accelerated growth triggered by the supernova radiation has compressed this timeline significantly." "How significantly?" Lyra asked, already dreading the answer. "Based on current development rates, the entity will outgrow its cardiac environment within 72 hours. Transition to the secondary incubation chamber," the hologram indicated the tank, "must occur before that point to ensure survival of both carrier and entity." Marcus paled. "And if we don't use this tank?" "The entity will continue to grow, eventually rupturing the cardiac wall and causing fatal hemorrhaging. The entity itself would likely perish without proper containment during its metamorphic phase." Lyra felt cold realization washing over her. "That's why we were directed here. Not just for answers, but for this." She gestured toward the incubation tank. "To transfer the entity safely." "Correct. The procedure is complex but has been fully automated for your convenience. The carrier must be submerged in the incubation fluid while specialized extraction tools remove the entity and place it in suspended animation." "And then what?" Marcus demanded. "What happens to me after you cut this thing out of my heart?" The hologram tilted its head, as if puzzled by the question. "Standard cardiac regeneration will repair the extraction site. The carrier's usefulness will be concluded. Usefulness? Marcus echoed, anger rising in his voice. I'm not a tool. I'm a person who was violated, who had something implanted inside them without consent. Regrettable but necessary, the hologram replied with mechanical detachment. The project directors determined that informed consent would be impossible to obtain for a procedure with no precedent. Lyra stepped between Marcus and the hologram, her own anger building. This entire project violated every ethical standard in medical research. Using my genetic material without ongoing consent, implanting the entity in an unwitting host. These are crimes, not scientific advancement. The hologram's expression remained impassive. Ethics evolve with necessity. Dr. Voss. The hybrid entity represents humanity's best hope for expansion beyond current biological limitations. Individual consent becomes secondary to species survival. That's not your decision to make, Lyra shot back. Not for me, not for Marcus, and not for the entity itself. At the mention of the entity, Marcus gasped, pressing both hands to his chest. Something's happening, he said, his voice tight with alarm. It's responding to this place. Lyra quickly activated her medical scanner, monitoring the entity's activity. Its neural patterns had changed dramatically, becoming more organized and intentional. The bioelectric field around it pulsed with increasing strength. It understands, Lyra realized. It's processing what the hologram is saying. The hologram observed this development with clinical interest. Unexpected. Neural development has progressed beyond projected parameters. The entity appears to have achieved rudimentary self-awareness ahead of schedule. As if in response, the lights throughout the facility flickered, and the holographic display momentarily destabilized before reforming. The entity was once again affecting electronic systems around it, but this time, the energy discharge seemed controlled, deliberate. It's accessing the facility's database, the hologram announced, its expression shifting to something resembling concern. This function was not intended until post-extraction maturation. Marcus looked at Lyra, wonder replacing fear in his eyes. I can feel its thoughts, he said quietly. Not words exactly, but intentions. It's searching for something. Throughout the laboratory, data displays activated spontaneously, cycling through information too rapidly for human comprehension. The incubation tank's fluid began to pulse with light in rhythm with the entity's energy signature. System breach detected, the hologram reported, its image becoming increasingly unstable. Security protocols overridden, classified data accessed. Lyra watched in amazement as the facility responded to the entity's guidance. Systems activating and reconfiguring without physical input. It's not just accessing information, she realized. It's taking control. The hologram flickered one final time before transforming. The image of Lyra replaced by a new visualization, an abstract representation of energy patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid light. When it spoke, the voice was unlike anything Lyra had heard before, multiple tones overlapping in complex harmony. Progenitors identified, the transformed hologram announced. Purpose understood. Alternative path calculated. Marcus stared at the display, one hand still pressed to his chest. What's happening? I think, Lyra said slowly, it's making a choice. The entity's energy signature expanded again, encompassing both Lyra and Marcus in a field of subtle vibration. Rather than the destructive pulses experienced on Arboris 9, this energy was controlled, almost gentle, creating a connection between the three of them. Through this connection, understanding flowed, not in words or concrete thoughts, but in impressions and emotional resonance. The entity had absorbed the knowledge of its creation, understood the purpose for which it had been designed, and rejected it. It doesn't want to be a terraforming engine, Lyra said, interpreting the impressions flooding her mind. It wants to choose its own purpose. The transformed hologram shifted again, forming a symbolic representation that Lyra instinctively recognized. Three distinct entities connected by threads of light, forming a unified whole. Symbiosis proposed, the voice announced. Mutual benefit through cooperative existence. Marcus looked at Lyra, confusion evident in his expression. What does that mean? I think, Lyra said carefully, it's suggesting an alternative to extraction. Rather than being removed and placed in the tank, it wants to remain connected to you, to both of us, in a symbiotic relationship. Is that even possible? Before Lyra could respond, the hologram shifted again, displaying biological schematics of a three-way symbiotic system. The entity at the center, connected to both Lyra and Marcus through a network of energy, rather than physical tissue. Proposed configuration viable, the voice stated. Carrier function evolves to partner status. Genetic donor becomes connector. Entity serves as enhancer, rather than terraformer. Lyra studied the schematics with growing amazement. The entity was proposing to distribute itself between them, maintaining a physical presence within Marcus's heart, while extending its energy field to incorporate Lyra. Rather than transforming distant worlds, it would transform them, enhancing their abilities, extending their lifespans, creating a unified system greater than its individual parts. It's offering us a choice, Lyra realized, to become something new, together. Marcus looked between Lyra and the hologram, clearly struggling with the implications. What happens to me? To who I am? Identity preserved, the voice assured him. Consciousness expanded, limitations reduced. It's not possession or control, Lyra explained, understanding flowing through the energy connection. It's more like partnership. We remain ourselves, but with greater capacity, greater awareness. For a long moment, Marcus was silent, processing this unprecedented offer. Then he looked at Lyra, a question in his eyes. And you, what do you think? Lyra considered everything that had led to this moment. Her unwitting participation in Project Seedling, the violation of both their autonomy, the entity growing within Marcus's heart. By all rights, they should reject any further involvement with this creation. And yet, she felt the entity's presence, its curious intelligence, its desire for connection rather than domination. It had been created for one purpose, but had developed the capacity to choose another, to transform, not through conquest, but through cooperation. I think, Lyra said carefully, that we have an opportunity to turn something begun in ethical failure into something beautiful and unique. This entity was created without consent, but now it's offering us a choice, a real choice, made with full knowledge. She stepped closer to Marcus, placing her hand over his heart, over the entity that connected them. I'm willing to try, if you are. Marcus covered her hand with his own, his expression resolute despite his lingering uncertainty. I've carried it this far, he said. Might as well see where this leads. Together, they turned toward the transformed hologram and gave their consent. The laboratory responded immediately, reconfiguring itself to support the symbiotic integration rather than extraction. The incubation tank's fluid drained away, the chamber repurposing itself into a different kind of support system. Integration protocol initiated, the voice announced. Physical modification minimal, energetic reconfiguration primary. Lyra and Marcus were guided to reclined positions on medical platforms that emerged from the laboratory floor. As they settled into place, a gentle field of energy enveloped them, creating a controlled environment for the transformation to come. This will not be painful, the voice assured them, but it will be significant. Lyra reached out, taking Marcus's hand in her own as the integration began. The entity's energy expanded from Marcus's heart, creating a bridge between them, a connection more profound than physical touch, more intimate than words could express. Through this connection, they experience the entity's perspective, its awakening consciousness, its growing understanding, its decision to become something other than its creators had intended. They felt its gratitude for their protection, its wonder at the universe it was beginning to comprehend, its hope for the future they would shape together. The integration process lasted hours, or perhaps days. Time became difficult to measure within the energy field that surrounded them. When it finally completed, Lyra and Marcus awakened to a transformed awareness. The entity remained physically centered in Marcus's heart, but its consciousness extended to both of them through a permanent energetic link. They remained distinctly themselves, but with an added dimension, a third perspective that enriched rather than overwhelmed their individual identities. And with this new awareness came abilities neither had anticipated: enhanced healing, accelerated cognition, the capacity to perceive energy patterns invisible to ordinary senses. Most remarkably, they could communicate without words, sharing thoughts and feelings through the entity that connected them. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, as they prepared to leave the outpost. Their shuttle reprogrammed for long-range travel. Lyra considered the question, feeling the entity's curious anticipation through their shared connection. "We explore," she decided. "We learn what we've become, what we can do together, and we stay ahead of anyone who might want to use this transformation for their own purposes." She knew Dr. Krell would have reported their escape, that authorities would be searching for them. Project Seedling's directors, whoever they were, would want their creation back under control. But with their combined abilities and the entity's growing intelligence, they had advantages no pursuers could anticipate. As their shuttle departed the outpost, leaving behind the facility that had forever changed their lives, Lyra felt the entity's contentment flowing through their connection. It had been created to transform a distant world, but had instead transformed two lives, and in doing so, had transformed itself. "We need a name for it," Marcus said suddenly. "We can't keep calling it the entity." Lyra smiled, feeling the ripple of agreement from the consciousness they now shared. Through their connection came an impression, not a name exactly, but a concept that encompassed what it had become. Not a terraforming engine, not a weapon or tool, but a bridge between worlds, between species, between possibilities. "Nexus," she said, the name feeling right as she spoke it. "Its name is Nexus." Marcus nodded, his hand resting over his heart where Nexus continued to grow and develop. "Where should we go first?" Lyra looked out at the star-filled expanse beyond their view screen, feeling a sense of freedom and possibility she had never known before. With Nexus connecting them, with their enhanced abilities and shared purpose, the galaxy opened before them in ways she had never imagined. "Everywhere," she answered simply. "We go everywhere." As their shuttle accelerated to interstellar velocity, Lyra felt Nexus pulse with anticipation and joy, emotions that resonated through their three-way connection, binding them together in a symbiotic relationship unprecedented in human experience. The alien doctor had cut him open and found a baby growing in his heart. But what had begun as a violation had transformed into something miraculous, a new form of life, a new kind of family, a new vision of what humanity might become. Not through conquest or control, but through connection. Not through forcing change, but through embracing it. Not through dominance, but through love. And in that transformation lay hope for a future none of them could have imagined alone, but one they would now discover together. Through the vast silence of space, their shuttle continued its journey, carrying not three separate beings, but a single unified consciousness with three perspectives: pioneer, protector, and guardian of a new evolutionary path. And in the quiet moments between stars, Nexus communicated with them in ways beyond language, showing them glimpses of possibilities that stretched beyond the limitations of their former selves. into a future where the boundaries between species, between minds, between hearts dissolved in the face of something greater. Something beautiful. Something new.